Hello, everyone. We are live at the Women Deliver Conference 2019 in Vancouver. I am Sophie Grégoire Trudeau. I'm your moderator for today, and I'm joined here by amazing women, and we are discussing how to change the narrative around gender equality. So, big important conversation, and I am joined in by Nidhi Dubey, India Country Director, Girl Rising, Hellen Malinga Apila, Gender and Sustainability Expert and Consultant, and Elizabeth Okumu, Program Manager for SRHR at Trust for Indigenous Culture and Health, TICA in Kenya. Welcome. Welcome, dear allies.
Thank you.
I want to start with you, Nidhi. So, in a conference like Women Deliver that's based on really driving solutions and talking about solutions, why is it important to talk about narrative change? Because for a long time, women and girls have been portrayed as victims in a system. We want to change that. We are powerful agents of change. How do we do this?
I think it's really, really important to talk about narrative change because narratives and perceptions really define where we are as society. What is the progress that we are making? What is the impact that we are creating? So changing that perception and changing that narrative, and especially in today's time when we see the dominant narrative and perception really sort of drives women and girls into, social norms that actually expect them to be, the caretakers, the mothers to be, the brides to be, it really sort of prohibits young girls to dream big for themselves. And that is why it is important to change. And why storytelling is important, and that is one way we can use, in changing the narrative, because stories are beautiful. They just create these little holes in your mind, in your soul, where, the beautiful messaging sort of organically seeps in. And you cannot, not a PowerPoint presentation, not a speech can do that where, for instance, a story from my neighborhood or, from another country can make that change. So just using that, to change the narrative is important. And conspicuous by their absence, women leaders and young role models, the problem is that people do not really have, young global sort of role models to look up to. Like how many women leaders, do we know? We know a few, but we need to know more. So therefore, I think just using storytelling to change that narrative, that perception, moving from victimhood to increasing voice and agency is extremely important conversation to have.
And when you talk to youth, quickly, because we don't have that much time, what is your story? What is your path of suffering that allowed you to tell your story and help out?
I come from a very conservative society in the northern part of India. My father stood by me when the entire family did not want me to go for further education or, do things, wanted me to get married early. But just this man, who was my father, stood by me to let me do that. I just feel like, this should be every girl's story. And this is a narrative that we can change, really sort of engaging men in the narrative change is also extremely important. So I think just having my father by my side changed my course, and sitting here with lovely people and telling my story, I think there is something that we can do about changing narratives.
And not everyone has a supportive father when it comes to gender equality. So what would you tell to these people who are suffering and cannot find that support within their own families? How do they reach out?
So at Girl Rising, we use stories of change. So the stories that we take to the villages and really sort of talk to young girls about dreaming big, for themselves. Also simultaneously work with mothers, fathers, religious leaders, decision makers at a village level, because just changing that mindset is important. So really sort of standing up for yourself and believing in that you can make that change. For instance, we heard this amazing young journalist from Zambia yesterday at the plenary stage. It just gives so much confidence and just so much, resilience to be able to stand for yourself. I think it's important. Just letting young girls dream big for themselves is one thing that we can do to change their story.
Thank you so much. Now, Hellen, I would like to ask you because fortunately and unfortunately, the media has a big influence on how we perceive women and girls. And we also see too often negative stories about women and girls. And it leaves a mark, right? It leaves a mark in girls, brains and men and boys as well. So I know you've done a lot of work with journalists. What do you think the role of media, and how important is it, and how can it shape the narrative around gender equality?
Yeah, it's true that the media plays a very significant, contribution to either portray women positively or negatively. So one of the problems that media has is they are looking for a story that will sell. And what makes the story sell sometimes is the worst part of the story. And yet behind that story, there is a good element of it. So we are encouraging the media to look behind the story, find the good element of that story. Let's take an example of a young girl who got pregnant, and then she didn't give up the fact that she was going to school. If she dropped out of school, she gave birth, she still wants to pursue education. So the media needs to find out what is going on in her mind beyond the fact that she got pregnant, and what were the circumstances around her. So also dig deeper into what's the power within that person, and look for the circumstances that made that person get into that situation. I think if I'm to take an example of women who are in the rural areas, there are a lot of stories of very powerful older women who pushed people to become who they are. They never went to school, but they pushed young people to go to school. And they made sure that these people went to school, completed education, and that's why who they are now. So the fact that we need to look for such significant change makers from the community and profile those ones and create change using that.
Helen, when we live in a world filled with, an obsession with celebrities and social media, what would you tell young people? Because the fact is that we kind of can become what we consume.
Yeah.
What would you tell young people when it comes to what they consume?
It's very important that young people find alternative sources of information. It's important that besides the social media, we go back into the actual traditional storytelling. I think the gap is the young people now are depending on their peer colleagues for information, which is not factual, which in fact is misleading. So the media needs to play a significant role, use facts. I have a problem with media who will just profile high cases of early pregnancies and child marriage, but will not find out why there are high cases of child marriage. What is the role of government, for example, in failing these children? I will take an example of an African Union that has committed itself to end child marriage, but what have they done? So I want the media to be able to draw linkages beyond the child or beyond the woman and beyond the girl. Find out who else is responsible for failing this person and take it beyond the person.
Can I ask you, Helen, where is your passion from? What is your storytelling? Where do you move from? What did you go through?
My personal experience is unique in the sense that my mother never went to school. And she's the most powerful woman that I know, because then she made me who I am.
Because she knew you had to get an education.
Exactly, and every day she reminds me that, Helen, you have a destiny beyond what you can achieve. And she tells me that if she was to become a young woman now, her dreams would be different, and she would work towards achieving that. And I think it means that all women have aspirations, they have power within them, and they can push fellow women to get somewhere. So that story needs to be told more. My other call for the media is we need to identify and use very positive, male change makers, champions. And then the reason for that is that among the few male change makers who can move situations globally, locally, nationally, there are those that are truly, truly change makers. But there are also those who are not truly change makers. I think yesterday we had very interesting scenarios when we had the African heads of states here, and we had a display of two different characters. So we had one that is a true change maker, who is the Canadian Prime Minister, and we have the other one who is guarding and protecting, the negative cultural practices. So it doesn't mean that everyone, for us now, as women who are in the movement in Africa, we are asking ourselves, how did this particular president from the African Union become the champion of gender equality on our continent?
Well, there is more women getting involved.
Exactly.
He is being,
Exactly.
you know.
So we are worried about that, and we are saying we have to take action. So when we say, so the media needs to do a little bit of work around that. You know, how did such a president become the champion of gender equality on the continent? We need to hold him accountable.
And if we want to see political change in our own respective countries,
Yeah.
how can people voice up? Elizabeth, I'll come to you. I know that you've worked with girls and women who have been traumatized and have gone through sexual trauma. And you've heard horrific stories, but also stories of resilience. What have you learned from this?
The greatest lesson that I've learned from this is that if we really want to realize change, then we need to reach women at an individual level. Because change starts from deep within. It is not something that is starting from a global level, and it's not something that is started collectively. But before we reach the collective space, we have to start from an individual level. The Women Delivered theme is power, progress, and change. And we're working in this space, we're realizing power, but deep down at the community level, the power does not exist, in that the woman is not seeing the power. We need to visualize this power to the woman at the ground or on the ground, in that they're able to see that I have the power. And they're able to see it at an individual level and then realize ways in which then they can use that to create change.
And what do you think? Because in a society where, for example, there are religious or cultural beliefs that do not allow women to express freely and to make decisions freely towards their own bodies, how do you think we can bring change with boys and men when it comes to prevention to violence against women?
One of the things is I've worked in communities where women are reduced to believe that their role is just marriage. And that's it, marriage and production of babies, and they cannot do anything beyond that. I've worked in communities where you ask girls their dreams and they just tell you to get married to a rich person, probably.
But how do we
Because
change that?
they do not see, and the community and the society does not make them see that they are better than that. And that's what I'm saying. Maybe one of the reasons is who trickles down information to them and what information gets to these women, because there's blockage of information. I will tell you a story. I've gone to a community where I wanted to have a conversation with women, but their husband stand up and said, tell us what you want to tell them and we will take this information to them. But then at the end of the day, what information is taken to this woman? It is information that is based on patriarchal and misleading society, in that we only want them to know what we want them to know so that they do not think outside the box.
And for those who feel overwhelmed
Yeah.
by this system, what do you want to tell our sisters? How do we fight against it?
First of
How
all,
do we change?
yeah, you can't fight against something without realizing it. So we have to realize that it exists. And then we also have to find the root causes of it. How did it come to be? And then find solutions through that. Then how do we go about changing this? Because women need to be at decision-making positions that they are not even at the community level. Decisions are made even on their bodies, even just the kind of family planning method or contraception method to
Don't
use.
get me going, Helen.
So if decisions are made on
Elizabeth,
my
sorry, I
body,
just-
if decisions are made on my body, then how will you empower me to make decisions at a national level or even a community level if I cannot even make a decision on my body?
And this conference is really about empowering everyone, every single human being, to raise her or his voice,
Yeah.
to create more equality within and in our own society.
Yeah.
So tell me, Nidhi, how will you use your power?
One thing that I think everybody has the power to do, and I will definitely do, is, if you spot a manifestation of gender bias stop it. Just, at that point of time, we don't need for policies to change, for big change to come. Even on the plenary stage yesterday, whether it was this young journalist from Zambia or the prime minister of this beautiful country, they spotted and they stopped. Like at that moment, at that point, in their own way, with their own right, I would do that.
Beautiful. Hellen, what will you do to use your power?
I think what I will do with my power is to continue to encourage the media to look out for factual information, use the correct information, speak to women, and write the story as is. Do not twist it because you want it to appear in the news, because you want it to be the breaking news or breaking story. Take it as fact. But also, I want the journalists to use the power that they have to change the narrative. How? But hold our governments accountable. Everybody would actually go after a president, for example, if the media put it out there and said he has failed. And people will start to say, how did he fail? So we need the media to take facts. For example, now, there is a whole global gender index that has been put out today here at Women Deliver that shows countries that are performing towards achieving gender equality, but others are already still at red. It means globally, we are not making it. We are in 2019. We have how many years to go? Very few. It means that the media can profile the situation, but hold governments accountable, hold women accountable, hold men accountable, hold everybody accountable, hold us who are here, hold us here accountable.
In our everyday action.
Because honestly, here we are for 4 days or 5 days, talking to ourselves. What are we taking back home?
Yes.
So one of the things we need to ask ourselves, here we are in Canada, in Vancouver, how are the women and the girls back home in Africa, in the different countries where we come from, how are they going to benefit? That is very, very critical.
Thank you. Elizabeth, how will you use your power?
I will use my power to continue what I have been doing, and is to reach one woman at a time in my work, because I believe that a collective power is more powerful than an individual one. So I see myself as a spark and a candle that will spark the other ones that do not yet have the spark in the communities. We have tried the top down change that of course has really created some change, but the bottom up is coming, and I am the one who's gonna start that, and that will be powerful.
I love it that you use the word candle, because it is better to light a candle than to curse at darkness.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we all have that light within us. We just have to let it shine. And always remember that what lies behind us is never as strong as what lies within us.
Yes.
So Nidhi, Hellen, and Elizabeth, thank you so much. And please, Women Deliver Conference, continue everybody to follow us. And we think of you in everything that we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.